Leviticus chapter 13, verses 1 to 59. I am reading from the New Revised Standard Version, the Green Bible. Verse 1, the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, verse 2, when a person has on the skin of his body a swelling or an eruption or a spot, and it turns into a leprous disease on the skin of his body, he shall be brought to Aaron, the priest, or to one of his sons, the priest. Verse 3, the priest shall examine the disease on the skin of his body, and if the hair in the disease area has turned white and the disease appears to be deeper than the skin of his body, it is a leprous disease. After the priest has examined him, he shall pronounce him ceremonially unclean. But if the spot is white in the skin of his body and appears no deeper than the skin, and the hair in it has not turned white, the priest shall confine the diseased person for 7 days. Verse 5, the priest shall examine him on the 7th day, and if he sees that the disease is checked and the disease has not spread in the skin, then the priest shall confine him 7 days more. Verse 6, the priest shall examine him again on the 7th day, and if the disease has abated and the disease has not spread in the skin, and the priest shall pronounce him clean, it is only an eruption, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean. Verse 7, but if the eruption spreads in the skin after he has sworn himself to the priest for his cleansing, he shall appear again before the priest. Verse 8, the priest shall make an examination, and if the eruption has spread in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous disease. Verse 9, when a person contracts a leprous disease, he shall be brought to the priest. Verse 10, the priest shall make an examination, and if there is white swelling in the skin that has turned the hair white, and there is quick raw flesh in the swelling. Verse 11, it is a chronic leprous disease in the skin of his body. The priest shall pronounce him unclean. He shall not confine him, for he is unclean. Verse 12, but if the disease breaks out in the skin so that it covers all the skin of the deceased person from the head to foot, so far as the priest can see, verse 13, then the priest shall make an examination, and if the disease has covered all his body, he shall pronounce him clean of the disease, since it has all turned white. He is clean. Verse 14, but if raw flesh ever appears on him, he shall be unclean. Verse 15, the priest shall examine the raw flesh and pronounce him unclean. Raw flesh is unclean, for it is leprous disease. Verse 16, but if the raw flesh again turns white, he shall come to the priest. Verse 17, the priest shall examine him, and if the disease has turned white, the priest shall pronounce the diseased person clean. He is clean. Verse 18, when there is on the skin of one's body a boil that has healed. Verse 19, and in the place of the boil there appears a white swelling or a reddish white spot, it shall be shown to the priest. Verse 20, the priest shall make an examination, and if it appears deeper than the skin and its hair has turned white, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. This is a leprous disease broken out in the boil. Verse 21, but if the priest examines it and the hair on it is not white, nor is it deeper than the skin, but has abated, the priest shall confine him 7 days. Verse 22, if it spreads in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is diseased. Verse 23, but if the spot remains in one place and does not spread, it is the scar of the boil. The priest shall pronounce him clean. Verse 24, or when the body has burned on the skin and the raw flesh of the burn becomes spot reddish white or white. Verse 25, the priest shall examine it. If the hair in the spot has turned white and it appears deeper than the skin, it is a leprous disease. It has broken out in the burn, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean. This is a leprous disease. Verse 26, but if the priest examines it and the hair in the spot is not white and it is not deeper than the skin but has abated, the priest shall confine him 7 days. Verse 27, the priest shall examine him the 7th day. If it is spread in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. This is a leprous disease. Verse 28, but if the spot remains in one place and does not spread in the skin, but has abated, it is swelling from the burn, and the priest shall pronounce him clean, for it is the scar of the burn. Verse 29, when a man and a woman has a disease on the head or in the beard. Verse 30, the priest shall examine the disease. If it appears deeper than the skin and the hair in it is yellow and thin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is an itch, a leprous disease of the head or the beard. Verse 31, if the priest examines the itching disease and it appears no deeper than the skin and there is no black hair in it, the priest shall confine the person with the itching disease for 7 days. Verse 32, on the seventh day, the priest shall examine the itch. If the itch has not spread and there is no yellow hair in it, and the itch appear to be no deeper than the skin, verse 33, he shall shave, but the itch he shall not shave. The priest shall confine the person with the itch for 7 days more. Verse 34, on the seventh day, the priest shall examine the itch, and if the itch has not spread in the skin, and it appears to be no deeper than the skin, the priest shall pronounce him clean. He shall wash his clothes and be clean. Verse 35, but if the itch spreads in the skin after he has pronounced clean, verse 36, the priest shall examine him. If the itch has spread in the skin, the priest need not seek for the yellow hair. He is unclean. Verse 37, but if in his eyes the itch is checked and black hair has grown it, and the itch is healed, he is clean, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. Verse 38, when a man or a woman has spots on the skin of the body, white spots. Verse 39, the priest shall make an examination, and if the spots on the skin of the body are of dull white, it is rash that has broken out in the skin. He is clean. Verse 40, if anyone loses the hair from his head, he is bald, but he is clean. Verse 41, if he loses the hair from his forehead and temples, he has baldness of the forehead, but he is clean. Verse 42, but if there is on the bald head or the bald forehead a reddish white disease spot, it is leprous disease breaking out on his bald head or his bald forehead. Verse 43, the priest shall examine him. If the diseased swelling is reddish white on his bald head or on his bald forehead, which resembles a leprous disease in the skin of the body. Verse 44, he is leprous, he is unclean. The priest shall pronounce him unclean. The disease is on his head. Verse 45, the person who has leprous disease shall wear torn clothes and let the hair of his head be disheveled, and he shall cover his upper lip and cry out, unclean, unclean. Verse 46, he shall remain unclean as long as he has the disease. He is unclean. He shall live alone. His dwelling shall be outside the camp. Verse 47, concerning clothing, when a leprous disease appears in it, in woolen or linen cloth. Verse 48, in warp or woof of linen or wool, or in a skin or in anything made of skin. Verse 49, if the disease shows greenish or reddish in the garment, whether in warp or woof or in skin or in anything made of skin, it is a leprous disease and shall be sworn to the priest. Verse 50, the priest shall examine the disease and put the diseased article aside for 7 days. Verse 51, he shall examine the disease on the 7th day. If the disease has spread in the cloth, in warp or woof, or in the skin, whatever be the use of the skin, this is a spreading leprous disease. It is unclean. Verse 52, he shall burn the clothing, whether disease in warp or woof, woolen or linen or anything of skin, for it is a spreading leprous disease. It shall be burned in fire. Verse 53, if the priest makes an examination and disease has not spread in the clothing, in warp or woof or anything of skin. Verse 54, the priest shall examine them to wash the article in which the disease appears, and he shall put it aside 7 days more. Verse 55, the priest shall examine the disease article after it has been washed. If the disease spot has not changed color, though the disease has not spread, it is unclean. You shall burn it in fire, whether the leprous spot is on the inside or on the outside. Verse 56, if the priest makes an examination and this disease has abated after it is washed, he shall tear the spot out of the cloth in warp or woof or out of skin. Verse 57, if it appears again in the garment, in warp or woof or anything of skin, it is spreading, you shall burn with the fire that in which the disease appears. Verse 58, but the cloth, warp or woof or anything of skin from which the disease disappears, when you have washed it, shall then be washed a second time, and it shall be clean. Verse 59, this is the ritual for leprous disease, in cloth of wolf or linen, either in warp or woof or anything of skin, to decide whether it is clean or unclean. I am reading from the New Revised Standard Version, the Green Bible, Leviticus chapter 13, verses 1 to 59.